Hello there and welcome back to The Sleepy Professor, where curiosity gently slows down and the mind finally takes its time to rest and wander. Tonight, we're going to drift through something you can't quite see, something subtle, quiet, and endlessly persuasive. We're exploring psychological illusions, those fascinating tricks of the mind that shape every corner of your reality, how you see the world around you, how you make the choices you think are completely your own. Even how you understand yourself when you look in the mirror at the end of a long, tiring day. From the way you remember moments that may have never happened quite the way you think they did, to the choices you believe you make freely but might actually be guided by invisible patterns, to the beliefs you hold so tightly without ever really questioning them. These illusions are always there, always working in the background. They quietly influence your thoughts, the habits you've built over years, your daily interactions with others, and even the stories you tell yourself about what reality truly is. Before we gently dive into this calm exploration of the mind's most hidden and curious patterns, I'd love to know something from you. Where are you watching from right now? What part of the world are you in? And what time is it in your little corner of the universe? It's strange when you really think about it, isn't it? Here we are, gathered together in this quiet moment, watching a video about illusions and invisible forces. And yet we're scattered all across the globe, each of us in different rooms, different time zones, different lives. But somehow, we're all being gently guided by the same invisible forces of the mind. If you find this slow, thoughtful, and soothing look at the human mind comforting, or if you're simply here to rest your weary thoughts after a long day, after hours of work or worry or just being busy, I'd be so grateful if you gave this video a gentle like or softly subscribe to this tired little channel. It truly helps us reach others who might need a calm, quiet moment to reflect on the curious and beautiful ways our minds shape the reality we live in every single day. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying this calm space we're creating together, if you appreciate these thoughtful explorations into the human mind, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. We're working towards 700 subscribers and your support truly matters. It tells me you want more of these deep, relaxing conversations about psychology and how our minds work. And while you're here, drop a comment below. Tell me what brought you to this video tonight. Are you curious about the mind, trying to understand yourself better, just looking for something calming to listen to? I read every single comment, and your thoughts help shape what we explore together. Now, let's take a deep breath together and begin. Selective attention bias. Selective attention bias happens when your brain carefully focuses on certain things while completely ignoring others. Think of this process like a filter, a very careful and precise filter. Your brain receives far more information than it could ever possibly handle all at once. Every second, your senses are flooded. Sounds from every direction, colors and shapes in your peripheral vision, the feeling of clothing on your skin, the temperature of the air around you, the faint hum of electronics. The distant sound of traffic or birds or voices. If your brain tried to process all of that at the same time with equal attention, everyday life would become absolutely overwhelming. You would notice every single sound, every tiny shift in color, every small movement around you, every little detail in your surroundings happening all at once, flooding your consciousness. This would make it incredibly hard, maybe even impossible, to make decisions or take any kind of focused action. So the filter helps you. It helps you stay focused, efficient, and functional. It lets you pay attention to what you believe in that particular moment matters most. And most of the time, this works beautifully. It keeps you sane. It keeps you moving forward. However, this very same filter, helpful as it is, can also lead to significant blind spots. Important details, critical pieces of information, might slip right past you without you even realizing they were ever there. These missed details can deeply affect your judgment, your understanding of situations, and even your relationships with others. For example, imagine you're driving down a busy street, focused intently on finding a specific street sign because you're trying to navigate to a new place. Your attention is locked on reading signs. Because of this intense focus, you might completely fail to notice a cyclist approaching quickly from the side, even though the cyclist is directly in your line of sight. Your eyes saw the cyclist. The light entered your eyes. But your brain didn't process it, didn't register it as important, because it was far too busy searching for that street sign. This perfectly demonstrates how selective attention bias can make you entirely unaware of things that are literally right in front of you, sometimes with dangerous consequences. Here's another example that happens all the time. If you're sitting at a busy, noisy cafe, surrounded by dozens of conversations, clattering dishes, the hiss of the espresso machine, and you're talking with a close friend, your brain skillfully tunes out all that noise around you so you can clearly hear what your friend is saying. This is incredibly helpful most of the time. It's essential, really, but here's the interesting part. If someone nearby, maybe at the table behind you, suddenly says your name, your brain immediately notices. It suddenly shifts attention. This swift shift proves something fascinating. Your brain actually hears much more than you're consciously aware of, but it only brings certain things into your conscious attention when they seem personally important or relevant to you. Selective attention bias also plays a powerful role in work environments, shaping decisions in ways people rarely notice. Imagine a manager sitting down to review a detailed quarterly report. If that manager already expects to find problems with the sales numbers, perhaps because of a conversation they had earlier or a worry that's been nagging them, they may focus almost exclusively on data that supports that belief. They might completely miss other valuable information, like genuinely positive customer feedback or growth in a different area, information that would give a much fuller, more balanced picture of what's actually happening. This happens because the brain is naturally wired to focus on what matches our current expectations or goals. In this way, selective attention doesn't just help us focus. It can also reinforce existing beliefs and actively prevent us from seeing the whole, complete truth. This bias shows up even more strongly during stressful situations, when the stakes feel high and time feels short. Under pressure, your brain narrows its focus even further. It's trying to protect you, trying to help you block out distractions, so you can handle the most urgent problem right in front of you. While this intense focus can certainly be useful in emergencies, it also dramatically raises the risk of missing critical signals that exist just outside that narrow beam of attention. For example, think about a doctor working in a chaotic emergency room. They might focus so completely, so intensely, on treating one alarming symptom that they overlook another quieter sign, a sign that's actually pointing toward a completely different and perhaps more serious diagnosis. That missed detail, small as it may seem, could lead directly to an error in treatment that affects someone's life. Experiments in psychology have shown us again and again just how powerful and how surprising this effect really is. One of the most famous studies, which you may have heard of, asked people to watch a short video of players passing a basketball back and forth. Viewers were given a simple task: count the number of passes made by one specific team. Sounds easy, right? While the viewers concentrated hard on counting those passes, something absolutely bizarre happened on screen. A person in a full gorilla suit casually walked right into the middle of the scene, stopped directly in the center, beat their chest like a gorilla, and then slowly walked off screen. And here's the shocking part. Many viewers, sometimes more than half, never noticed the gorilla at all, not even a little. Their brains completely filtered it out, erased it from their conscious experience, because they were so intensely focused on counting basketball passes. This experiment, called the Invisible Gorilla Study, demonstrates in the most vivid, undeniable way how selective attention can make people completely blind to things that seem totally obvious once they're pointed out. Technology, especially in our modern world, can dramatically increase the effects of selective attention bias. Smartphones buzzing with constant notifications, emails pinging, messages arriving, social media feeds refreshing, multitasking between a dozen apps and screens, all of this splits our focus into many scattered, fragmented parts. The brain jumps rapidly between tasks, switching, but it processes each one far less deeply than it would if we focused on just one thing. This constant task switching creates even more blind spots, more gaps in our awareness. For instance, checking your phone while walking down a sidewalk, something almost everyone does now, can make you miss a step, bump into another person, or even walk into traffic. Your brain chooses to focus almost entirely on the glowing screen in your hand, leaving far less awareness available for the physical environment moving around you. In high-stakes fields like aviation or surgery, where a single mistake can cost lives, professionals receive years of special, intensive training specifically designed to counter this bias. Pilots use detailed checklists religiously to make absolutely sure they don't miss crucial steps during flight, especially during takeoff and landing when things happen fast. Surgeons often work in carefully coordinated teams where team members are trained to double-check and triple-check each other's work, to watch for what others might miss. These strategies are designed to deliberately widen attention, to force awareness beyond the narrow beam, and to reduce the chance of missing key, life-saving details. Selective attention also powerfully shapes how people consume news and information, especially in our deeply divided times. If someone already believes a certain political opinion or holds a particular worldview, their brain will almost automatically pay much more attention to news stories that match, support, and reinforce that view. At the same time, it may ignore, skim over, or quickly forget stories that challenge it, stories that present uncomfortable facts or opposing perspectives. This creates a self-reinforcing loop, a cycle where people become more and more convinced of their beliefs over time, not because they've examined all the evidence, but because they only notice and remember information that supports what they already think. This process contributes significantly to misunderstandings, conflicts, and deep divisions in society. Here's a simple, everyday scenario that shows exactly how this works in relationships. Suppose you believe, maybe from one or two experiences, that your neighbor is unfriendly, cold, or rude. The next time you see them outside, maybe getting their mail or mowing the lawn, you immediately notice when they fail to say hello or when they don't smile. You register it, you remember it, it confirms what you already think, but here's what you might not notice. You might completely miss the times when they do smile at you, or wave, or nod politely. Your brain filters specifically for behavior that fits your pre-existing belief and quietly discards behavior that doesn't match. Over time, this selective filtering reinforces your view of them as unfriendly, even if that view is not accurate at all, even if they're actually trying to be kind most of the time. The human brain evolved selective attention thousands and thousands of years ago as a critical survival tool. Early humans, living in dangerous environments, needed to notice predators hiding in tall grass or spot food sources from a distance, while ignoring countless unimportant background details like the rustling of leaves or distant bird calls. This ability to focus allowed our ancestors to make quick, life-saving decisions and gave them far better chances of staying alive long enough to pass on their genes. In modern life, thankfully, the threats have changed dramatically. We're not watching for lions or tigers, but the same ancient system still operates in our brains. Now, instead of predators, our focus might lock onto a work deadline, a tense social interaction, or a worry about money. Awareness of this bias, simply knowing it exists and recognizing it in action, can genuinely help reduce its effects on your life. When you deeply understand that your attention has real, hard limits, you can take conscious steps to expand it to see more. For example, you can pause before making an important decision and ask yourself a simple but powerful question. What might I be missing? What am I not seeing? You can also deliberately seek input from other people who may notice completely different things than you do because their attention is focused elsewhere. Even simple, small habits can make a real difference. Taking notes during meetings, using reminders on your phone, creating checklists for tasks. These small tools can help you catch details that would otherwise slip silently past your filter, unseen and forgotten. Selective attention bias affects absolutely everyone, regardless of skill, intelligence, education, or experience. Even the top experts in their fields, people with decades of training, are not immune to it. The real goal, is not to eliminate the bias, which is probably impossible, but to recognize when it might be quietly at work in your mind, shaping what you see and what you miss. By doing that, by simply noticing it, you can make more informed, balanced choices and see a more accurate, complete picture of the world around you. Change blindness. Change blindness happens when you completely fail to notice a change in what you're looking at, even when that change happens right in front of your eyes. It sounds impossible, doesn't it? But it happens to everyone all the time. The brain, as efficient as it is, does not actually take in every single detail of a scene. That would be far too much information, too overwhelming. Instead, it builds a rough, general picture of what it believes is there, a kind of mental sketch. This picture is usually good enough for most daily tasks: walking, talking, driving, eating, but it leaves gaps, sometimes big gaps. When something in your environment changes slowly, gradually, or when it changes outside your direct focus, outside that narrow spotlight of attention, your brain may not register the change at all. You think you're seeing everything. You feel like you're fully aware. But in reality, you're filling in missing pieces with assumptions, with guesses, with what you expect to be there. Researchers have studied this fascinating effect using some surprisingly simple experiments. In one very well-known study, a person on a college campus approaches a passerby and politely asks for directions to a building. While the two are talking, having a normal conversation, two other people suddenly walk between them carrying a large door or a big piece of wood. It blocks the view for just a second or two. During that very brief moment, while the view is blocked, the original person asking for directions quickly switches places with someone else, a completely different person, different height, different clothes, different voice. And here's the stunning part. Many of the passers-by, maybe even most of them, continue giving directions without ever realizing they are now speaking to a completely different human being. This experiment shows in the clearest, most undeniable way how easily the brain can overlook absolutely major changes when attention is directed elsewhere, when focus is occupied. Another common experiment uses simple photographs displayed on a screen. Participants see one image for a few seconds. Then they see a second image that's almost exactly the same, but with one small change. Maybe a car in the background is missing. Maybe a person's shirt changed color. Maybe a window that was open is now closed. Between the two images, a blank screen flashes for just a moment. Many participants take a surprisingly long time to spot the difference, sometimes a full minute or more, even though they're actively looking for it. This happens because that blank screen, brief as it is, disrupts the natural visual flow, preventing the brain from perceiving the change as movement. The brain doesn't carefully compare every single detail of the two images side by side. Instead, it assumes that most things have stayed the same. So it simply doesn't notice what's different, unless the change is glaringly obvious or directly relevant to the task they were given. In everyday life, change blindness happens far more often than most people ever realize. Imagine this. You're sitting in your car waiting at a red light, maybe checking your phone for just a second or glancing at the radio. While you're not looking directly ahead, the car in front of you turns right and drives away. When you look up again a moment later, you might not immediately notice the car is completely gone. Your brain expected the car to still be sitting there, so it mentally fills in that expectation, that assumption, rather than updating the scene in real time with what's actually there now. This split-second delay in awareness can affect how quickly you react when the light turns green, or whether you notice something else happening in the intersection. Effect becomes even stronger, even more pronounced when you're deeply focused on one specific task. For example, if you're cooking dinner and paying close attention to a recipe, reading the steps carefully, measuring ingredients, your attention is locked there. You might not notice at all that someone walked into the kitchen and quietly moved your car keys from the counter to the table. Later, when you're ready to leave and you go looking for your keys, you feel confused, maybe even frustrated. You're absolutely certain they were never moved. You'd swear you would have seen it. But in reality, your brain simply failed to record the moment of change because it was busy, fully occupied, processing something else it deemed more important in that moment. Change blindness can create genuinely serious problems in high-stakes, life-or-death situations. Pilots flying commercial aircraft must constantly monitor dozens of instruments at once. Altitude, speed, fuel levels, engine temperature, navigation. If one gauge changes slowly, gradually, or if the change happens outside the pilot's main focus while they're looking at something else, they may not notice the shift until it's too late, until the plane is in danger. In healthcare settings, a nurse monitoring a patient might fail to see that a heart rate monitor has gradually shifted from normal, steady readings to dangerous, irregular ones if that shift happens slowly enough. In these critical cases, missing a change can directly lead to harm, to injury, even to death. That's why these systems are carefully designed with alarms, beeping alerts, and flashing lights specifically intended to grab attention immediately when something important changes. The brain relies heavily on shortcuts, on fast, efficient processes to handle information quickly. These shortcuts, called heuristics, are incredibly useful most of the time. They keep us functional, but they also leave us vulnerable, open to missing changes we should probably see. When you first enter a room, your brain doesn't carefully analyze every single detail. It doesn't catalog every object. Instead, it rapidly notices key features, where the furniture is, who's present. Whether anything seems immediately out of place or threatening. Once it builds this quick mental map of the space, it largely stops paying close attention to most of the details. It assumes stability. If something in the background changes while you're focused on a conversation or absorbed in a task, you may never notice it because your brain has already decided the scene is stable and doesn't need constant rechecking. Gradual changes are especially hard to detect. If a wall in your office slowly shifts color over the course of several hours, maybe because of changing sunlight or a dimming bulb, you may never consciously notice it. Your brain updates its mental map little by little, in tiny increments, blending each small change smoothly into the overall picture. This is why people sometimes completely fail to notice when a close friend has grown a beard over a couple of weeks, or changed their hairstyle, or lost weight. They see the person regularly, almost every day, and the change happens in small, gradual steps. So the brain doesn't mark it as new information. It just quietly adjusts. Change blindness also has a powerful effect on memory, on what you think you remember. You may sincerely believe you would clearly remember a major change if it happened right in front of you. But here's the problem. Your memory depends entirely on what you actually noticed at the time. If you never noticed the change in the first place, your memory can't store it. So your brain fills in the missing pieces later with guesses, with assumptions. This can lead to false confidence, to being absolutely certain about something that isn't true. In court cases, eyewitnesses often testify with complete certainty about what they saw during a crime or an accident. But research shows that if a significant change happened right in front of them and went unnoticed because of change blindness, their memory will have a blank space. They'll fill that space with what seems logical, what fits the story. This makes change blindness a very serious concern in legal settings, where accurate observation and memory can determine someone's guilt or innocence. An everyday example of this happens constantly in busy offices. Imagine a coworker walks by your desk and places an important report right there while you're deeply focused on writing an email. You might glance briefly at the report without really processing it, without truly seeing it. Later, when you need that report and finally look for it, you might genuinely accuse someone of moving it or taking it. You're convinced it was never there, but the report never moved at all. You simply failed to register the moment it appeared. This simple, innocent mistake shows how easily change blindness can create misunderstandings and even conflicts between people. Technology, especially the modern flood of screens and devices, can make this issue significantly worse. People constantly switch between screens, between their phones, computers, tablets, sometimes all in the same minute. When attention jumps rapidly like that, the brain has even less capacity to notice changes. For instance, while toggling quickly between multiple browser tabs on your computer, you might completely miss that an important message or alert has appeared in one window. Designers of safety-critical software, the kind used in hospitals, airplanes, and power plants, try hard to solve this problem by using bright color changes, flashing alerts, or loud sounds specifically designed to grab attention. Without these strong signals, subtle but critical changes might go entirely unnoticed. The phenomenon also plays a surprisingly important role in security and fraud. Magicians exploit change blindness constantly to perform tricks that seem impossible. While the audience's attention is focused on one hand, on one object, the magician's other hand makes a quick change that goes completely unseen. Thieves and pickpockets use very similar tactics. They create a distraction, maybe by bumping into you or asking a question, so your focus shifts to one thing while they act elsewhere. The brain's natural limits, its inability to see everything at once, make these tricks not just possible but reliably effective. Being aware of change blindness can genuinely help reduce its effects on your daily life. When you know and accept that your attention has hard limits, you can consciously take steps to slow down and scan your surroundings more carefully, more deliberately. Pilots rely on checklists for exactly this reason. A checklist forces you to look at each specific item, one by one, instead of just assuming everything is as expected. Surgeons use similar systems, calling out steps aloud so the team can catch anything that might be missed. In daily life, you can build similar helpful habits, double-checking that the door is locked, rereading an important message before you send it, taking a moment to look around before you leave a room. These small pauses create opportunities to catch things you might otherwise miss. Consider a simple situation many people experience. You park your car in a large, crowded parking lot at a mall or airport. If you're distracted while parking, maybe thinking about your shopping list or talking on the phone, you may later completely forget where you left your car. The car obviously hasn't moved, but your brain never properly recorded its exact location because your attention was elsewhere. To prevent this frustrating situation, you can pause for just a moment after parking, look around deliberately and take note of landmarks. A light pole, a store entrance, a row number. This small, extra step creates a clear, strong memory and dramatically reduces the chance of confusion later. Change blindness shows us something important and humbling. Seeing is not the same as noticing. Your eyes can take in information, light can hit your retinas, signals can travel to your brain, but the brain still decides what to keep and what to ignore. By understanding how this process works, by recognizing its limits, you can identify moments when you might be missing something truly important. This awareness can genuinely improve safety, communication, decision-making, and relationships in many parts of life. Inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness happens when you completely fail to see something that's right in front of your eyes, directly in your field of vision, because your focus is entirely locked onto another task. It's related to change blindness, but slightly different. The brain has hard, real limits on how much information it can actively process at one time. When all of your attention, all of your mental energy, is directed at a single activity, there's simply very little room left for anything else. As a result, even clear, obvious events happening right in front of you can go completely unnoticed, invisible. You believe, you feel certain, that you're fully aware of your surroundings, but your brain is quietly filtering out countless details that don't seem immediately important in that specific moment. One of the most famous studies showing this effect, which we touched on earlier, is called the invisible gorilla experiment. It's worth going into more detail because it's so striking. In this study, people watched a video of two teams, one wearing white shirts and one wearing black shirts, passing basketballs back and forth. Viewers were given a clear, simple task. Count the number of passes made specifically by the team in white shirts. While the viewers focused intently on counting, concentrating hard to get the number right, something completely absurd happened on screen. A person in a full, realistic gorilla suit walked slowly into the scene, right into the middle of the players, stopped directly in the center, faced the camera, beat their chest dramatically like a gorilla, and then casually walked off screen. The gorilla was on screen for a full 9 seconds. Afterward, when the video ended, many viewers were absolutely shocked, even upset to learn about the gorilla. They insisted it couldn't be true, they would have seen it, but they hadn't seen it at all, not even a glimpse. Their attention was so completely focused on the counting task that the unexpected event, bizarre as it was, never registered in their conscious minds. This experiment reveals a simple, undeniable truth about how attention works. Attention is selective, narrow, limited. When you focus intensely on one thing, you automatically, unconsciously ignore many other things without realizing it's happening. Inattentional blindness is not about poor eyesight or lack of effort or being careless. It happens because the brain has to prioritize. It treats the focused task as the most important thing and actively pushes other information aside, into the background, out of awareness. Everyday life offers so many examples of this effect, far more than most people realize. Imagine you're at work, sitting at your desk, writing an important email. Maybe it's to your boss or a client. You're concentrating hard on choosing exactly the right words, making sure there are no spelling mistakes, trying to sound professional. While you're typing, deeply absorbed, a coworker walks right past your desk, maybe just 2 feet away, waves their hand and says hello cheerfully. You might not see them or hear them at all. Not because you're rude, not because you don't care, but because your brain is completely locked onto the email. Later, your coworker might mention, maybe with a little hurt in their voice, that you ignored them. And you'll be genuinely surprised, even defensive, because you never noticed their presence at all. You have no memory of it. Driving is another very common situation where an attentional blindness can have genuinely serious, even deadly consequences. A driver focused intently on finding a particular street sign or address might entirely fail to see a pedestrian stepping into the crosswalk right in front of their car. The pedestrian is in plain sight. They're not hiding, but the driver's attention is fully occupied with scanning for that sign, so the brain doesn't register the person. This is one of the main reasons why distracted driving, things like talking on the phone, adjusting a GPS, or even having an intense conversation with a passenger, is so incredibly dangerous. The eyes may be open and looking ahead at the road, but the mind is elsewhere, occupied, focused on something else. In sports, athletes experience inattentional blindness regularly during competition. A basketball player guarding an opponent might focus so intensely, so completely, on that one player that they fail to notice another teammate moving into perfect position to score an easy basket. The opportunity is right there, visible, but it's outside their focus. Coaches design specific drills and training exercises to teach players to widen their focus deliberately, to become aware of the entire court or field, not just the person directly in front of them. Without this training, players will miss key moments, critical opportunities that can completely change the outcome of a game. Emergency situations highlight just how strong and how dangerous this effect can really be. In a hospital, during a chaotic moment, a nurse might focus so intensely on starting an IV line, getting the needle in correctly, that they entirely miss visible signs that the patient's condition is rapidly worsening, their color changing, their breathing becoming shallow, their monitor showing a dangerous reading. In firefighting, a responder might be so intent on putting out visible flames right in front of them that they completely fail to see a wall or ceiling starting to collapse nearby. These are not careless mistakes made by bad professionals. They're the natural result of the brain's hard limits under stress, pressure, and intensely focused attention. The military and law enforcement have studied inattentional blindness extensively because lives depend on awareness. Soldiers in combat must track multiple threats at once, enemies in different positions, civilians in the area, the terrain, their teammates. If a soldier focuses too much on one danger, one target, they might miss another threat approaching from the side or from behind. Training programs teach specific strategies to scan the environment constantly, to check blind spots, to force attention to shift regularly. Police officers in high-pressure encounters face very similar challenges. An officer might focus so completely on a weapon in a suspect's hand that they miss other critically important details like the presence of bystanders behind the suspect or another person entering the scene. Technology can both help and significantly worsen this problem, depending on how it's used. Navigation systems, alerts, reminders, and alarms can guide attention toward critical details at the right moment. At the same time, constant notifications, buzzing phones, flashing screens, all of these compete aggressively for focus. A person checking their phone while walking through a busy city street may not notice a car turning the corner just a few feet away. The phone, the screen, becomes the primary task. Everything else in the surroundings fades, unnoticed, into the background. Consider a simple, relatable scene at home. You're in the kitchen cooking dinner, maybe following a recipe on your tablet. The video is playing. You're focused on the steps, on not burning anything. Your child walks into the kitchen and asks you a question, but you're so absorbed in following the recipe, in timing everything correctly, that you don't hear them at all. The child repeats the question, maybe a little louder, maybe with some frustration. You suddenly realize they've been standing there talking to you for a while. In that moment, you weren't deaf. You weren't ignoring them on purpose. Your attention was fully, completely locked on cooking, creating a temporary but very real blindness to everything else, including your own child. Inattentional blindness also affects memory in important ways. You simply cannot remember what you never noticed in the first place. If you fail to see an event because your focus was elsewhere, completely occupied, your memory will have a blank space, a gap. This can lead to confusion, frustration, even arguments later. For example, imagine you're in a workplace meeting. You're writing notes carefully about one specific topic being discussed. While you're focused on writing, someone else introduces a completely new idea, a new proposal. Because you were focused on note-taking, your attention elsewhere, you may later insist confidently that the new idea was never mentioned at all. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room remembers it clearly. They heard it. You didn't, not because you weren't there, but because your attention was locked elsewhere. Magicians, skilled performers, take deliberate advantage of inattentional blindness to perform tricks that seem absolutely impossible. They carefully direct the audience's attention to one hand, one object, one action, while secretly making changes elsewhere with their other hand, because the audience's focus is exactly where the magician wants it. They completely fail to see what's really happening. The trick works not because of magic, but because of the brain's limits. Pickpockets use remarkably similar tactics on the street. They create a distraction, maybe by bumping into someone, asking for directions, or dropping something. The victim's attention is pulled immediately to the distraction, and in that moment of focus, their awareness of everything else drops. The pickpocket's other hand takes the wallet, and the theft goes completely unnoticed until much later. Research shows that inattentional blindness can occur even with highly unusual, striking, dramatic events, not just subtle ones. The gorilla experiment proves this beyond any doubt. Something as obvious and strange as a person in a gorilla suit can still go completely unseen if attention is focused elsewhere. This is exactly why eyewitness testimony in criminal cases can be so unreliable, so problematic. A person may be completely, absolutely certain about what they saw during a crime or accident. They'll testify confidently, but if their attention was narrow, focused on one thing, they may have missed huge, critical details that were right there. Courts and investigators must seriously consider this limitation, this flaw in human perception, when evaluating witness statements. Being aware of this effect can genuinely help reduce its impact on your life and your decisions. The first and most important step is to humbly accept that no one, absolutely no one, sees everything. Even when you feel alert, awake, and attentive, your attention is still limited, still narrow. You can practice small habits that help widen your focus. Drivers, for example, can make a deliberate point to scan their surroundings regularly, not just stare at one spot on the road. At work, you can pause intentionally between tasks, look up, and check if you missed anything happening around you. In high-stakes jobs where lives are at risk, teams use structured, deliberate systems specifically designed to fight inattentional blindness. Pilots run through detailed checklists step by step to make absolutely sure nothing is overlooked, even when they're tired or stressed. In hospitals, surgical teams perform verbal confirmations of key steps before moving on, saying things out loud to force attention to shift and to cover areas that might otherwise be ignored. Everyday actions can also help protect you from missing important things. If you're walking in a crowded place while using your phone, a simple solution is to stop walking completely while you check your screen. This prevents your attention from being split between two competing tasks, both of which require focus. If you're in a meeting or a class, you can close other programs on your computer, silence notifications, so your focus can stay fully on the discussion happening in front of you. Small, deliberate changes like these can significantly lower the risk of missing important details that could affect your safety, your relationships, or your work. Inattentional blindness shows us something profound and a little unsettling. Seeing is absolutely not the same as perceiving. Your eyes may look directly at something, light may enter, signals may fire, but if attention is elsewhere, if your mind is focused on something else, the brain simply does not register it. it doesn't enter your conscious awareness. This gap between sight and awareness affects everyone, no matter how careful, how intelligent, how experienced they are. By understanding how focus really works, how narrow and limited it can be, you can make conscious choices to improve how you notice the world around you and avoid the mistakes, big and small, that come from missing what's right in front of you. The Mulalaya illusion. The Mulalaya illusion is one of the most classic, most studied examples of how the brain can completely misinterpret what the eyes are actually seeing. It's beautifully simple but deeply revealing. The illusion involves two perfectly straight lines of exactly equal length. At the ends of one line, small arrows point inward, like the sharp tips of a spear or an arrowhead. At the ends of the other line, the arrows point outward, spreading apart like the tail feathers of a bird. Even though both lines are precisely the same length, you can measure them with a ruler and confirm it. Most people see the line with the inward-pointing arrows as noticeably shorter, and the line with the outward-pointing arrows appears longer. This simple image, just two lines and some arrows, shows us something profound. Context changes perception dramatically. The brain doesn't only see the line itself in isolation. It also interprets that line in relation to the shapes, the angles, the patterns around it. This illusion has been studied carefully for more than a century now. Franz Karl Mulalaya, a German psychologist, first described it way back in 1889. He wanted to demonstrate, to prove scientifically, how the mind adds layers of meaning to raw visual information. The eyes send pure data, simple signals to the brain, but the brain doesn't just passively receive that data. It actively processes it, interprets it, by comparing it constantly to past experiences, to learn patterns, to expectations built over years. In this particular case, the direction of those little arrows provides a powerful context that directly influences how the brain judges length. To understand why this happens, why it feels so automatic, consider how people naturally see depth, distance, and three-dimensional space in everyday life. In the real, three-dimensional world we live in, lines that angle inward, that converge, often signal that something is far away from you. Think about the corners of a room where the walls meet, or the edges of a long hallway stretching into the distance. Lines that angle outward, that diverge, often signal that something is close to you nearby, like the edge of a table right in front of you, or the frame of a doorway you're standing in. The brain, incredibly efficient and fast, uses these visual cues constantly to understand distance and size. When you look at the Mulalaya illusion, your brain unconsciously interprets the inward-pointing arrows as part of a distant corner, something receding away from you, and it interprets the outward-pointing arrows as part of a nearby edge, something jutting toward you. This automatic interpretation causes the line with outward arrows to seem longer, closer, bigger. Even though on the flat page or screen, both lines are identical, perfectly equal. Imagine you're standing at one end of a long, narrow hallway in an old building. The lines of the walls, the lines of the ceiling, the lines of the floor, they all angle inward, converging, meeting at a point far in the distance. Your brain uses these converging lines, these angles, to accurately judge depth, to understand how far away things are. If someone stands at the far end of that hallway, they appear smaller to your eyes even though their actual physical size hasn't changed at all. The Mulalaya illusion works in a remarkably similar way. The inward arrows mimic, they copy, the angles found in faraway corners. The outward arrows mimic the angles of close objects, things near you. The brain automatically applies its built-in rules for interpreting depth, rules learned over a lifetime of looking at three-dimensional spaces. And this creates the powerful false impression of different lengths. Here's what makes this effect so fascinating and so humbling. Even when people know about the illusion, even when they've studied it, even when you measure the lines with a ruler right in front of them and prove they're equal, they still see the lines as unequal. You cannot override it. You cannot simply decide to see the lines correctly. The perception happens automatically, instantly, before conscious thought even begins. You can't turn it off. This shows us that perception is not a choice. It's automatic, involuntary, deeply embedded in how your brain processes the world. The illusion also reveals surprising differences between cultures, between how people grow up. Researchers have discovered something really interesting. People who grow up in environments absolutely filled with straight lines, sharp corners and rectangular shapes, like modern cities with tall buildings, square windows and grid-patterned streets, are much more strongly affected by the Mulalaya illusion. People from rural areas, or from places where traditional architecture uses round huts and fewer straight lines, are significantly less affected by it. The illusion is weaker for them. This cultural difference suggests something important. Visual perception isn't purely hardwired. It's also shaped, trained by experience, by the environment you grow up in. The brain learns to interpret certain patterns based on what it sees every single day. In a world full of sharp angles and corners, those inward and outward arrows trigger very strong depth cues. In a world without those geometric shapes, where buildings are round and organic, the brain simply doesn't apply the same rules. So the illusion loses much of its power. You can see this through a simple scenario. Imagine a child growing up in a modern city apartment, surrounded every single day by square windows, rectangular doors, straight hallways, sharp corners everywhere they look. Their brain becomes incredibly skilled, almost expert, at reading these shapes as automatic signals of distance and size. When that child looks at the Mulalaya illusion years later, their brain immediately applies the same interpretation without hesitation. It treats the inward arrows like a far corner receding into space. It treats the outward arrows like a near edge jutting forward. The lines seem obviously different in length. Now imagine a different child growing up in a traditional roundhouse with curved walls, circular doorways, and very few sharp angles anywhere. Their brain has far less reason, far less experience, to link those arrow shapes to depth and distance. When they see the same illusion, the effect is much weaker because their brain simply doesn't make the same automatic connection. The Mulalaya illusion appears quietly in everyday situations all around you, often without anyone realizing it. Interior designers unknowingly use it. A room with angled furniture, with slanted walls, with specific geometric patterns, can seem larger or smaller depending entirely on how the lines guide your perception, how they trick your brain. In architecture, certain deliberate design choices can make hallways appear much longer than they really are, or make ceilings seem dramatically higher. It's all manipulation of the same visual rules. Advertisers also use remarkably similar tricks in product packaging all the time. A box designed with specific shapes and patterns may appear noticeably bigger or smaller than it really is, directly influencing how consumers unconsciously view the product and whether they think they're getting good value. You think you're seeing accurately, but you're not. This illusion demonstrates clearly that seeing is not a simple, straightforward process at all. It's complex and fragile. The eyes capture light, convert it into electrical signals, and send those signals racing to the brain. But the brain must then interpret those signals, must make sense of them. It uses context, everything around the object. It uses past experiences, everything you've seen before. And it uses built-in rules, shortcuts developed over millions of years of evolution. All of this happens to make sense of what you see. Most of the time, thankfully, these interpretations are accurate and genuinely helpful. They allow people to move through the world safely, quickly, and efficiently without constantly second-guessing what they're looking at. However, in certain specific situations, the exact same rules create obvious mistakes, clear errors, like the Mulalaya illusion shows us. Consider how this plays out in practical fields like reading maps or architectural blueprints. Someone looking carefully at a building map might significantly misjudge distances if certain lines or shapes on that map resemble those in the illusion. A hallway drawn on a blueprint might seem much longer than it actually is simply because of the way its lines are drawn, the angles used. This can lead directly to design errors, to costly misunderstandings during construction. Professionals in these fields, architects and engineers, learn over time to account for such visual effects by always using precise measurements, numbers, instead of ever relying on visual judgment alone. The illusion also affects decision-making in surprisingly subtle ways. Imagine you're standing in a store comparing two different products sitting side by side on a shelf. The packaging of one product has outward angles, diverging lines that make it seem larger, more substantial. The other has inward angles, converging lines that make it seem smaller, less impressive. Even if both packages contain exactly the same amount of product, you might unconsciously choose the one that appears bigger. Your eyes trick you. Companies often design their packaging very deliberately to take advantage of these visual biases, knowing perfectly well that customers will trust their eyes, their immediate perception, far more than the small printed numbers listing the actual contents. Artists throughout history have used these same principles skillfully in their work. A painter might use carefully placed converging lines to create a powerful sense of depth on a completely flat canvas. By manipulating angles and shapes with great precision, they can make a painted scene appear genuinely three-dimensional, realistic, immersive. This artistic skill relies entirely on the same brain processes, the same automatic interpretations that cause the Müller-Lyer illusion. The difference is that in art, the distortion is intentional, deliberate, and understood by the artist, while in the illusion, it happens without any awareness, completely automatically. The Müller-Lyer illusion also plays a real role in how people judge speed and distance in motion, with potentially serious consequences. Drivers traveling through a narrow tunnel, with strongly converging lines on the walls, may significantly misjudge how fast they're actually going. The angles of the tunnel walls can create a false, exaggerated sense of movement and speed. Pilots experience very similar effects when landing aircraft on runways that appear wider or narrower than expected because of the angles and lines painted on them. In both cases, extensive training and precise instruments help pilots and drivers correct these errors, these false perceptions. But the initial perception, that first automatic impression, is still shaped powerfully by the same visual rules that drive the illusion. Understanding this illusion helps reveal the real limits of human perception, limits we rarely think about. People rely heavily, almost completely, on their senses to make decisions every single day. But those senses are not perfect. They're flawed, they can be fooled. The brain constantly interprets and adjusts what the eyes see, filling in gaps, making assumptions. And sometimes it simply gets it wrong. The Müller-Lyer illusion is just a simple drawing, 2 lines and some arrows. Yet it exposes beautifully how complex, how fragile, and how unreliable the process of seeing really is. By studying it carefully, researchers gain valuable insight into how the mind actually works, and why people sometimes see the world in ways that don't match objective reality at all. Color constancy. Color constancy is the brain's remarkable, almost magical way of keeping color stable and consistent even when the lighting around you changes dramatically. This ability helps you recognize objects reliably in completely different settings. A ripe red apple looks red whether you see it under bright, harsh sunlight outdoors, under warm indoor lamps in your kitchen, or in the cool shade of a tree. The actual light hitting that apple, the wavelengths entering your eyes, changes significantly in each situation. But your brain cleverly adjusts the color automatically, so you continue to see it as the same familiar red. Without color constancy, without this constant correction, the world would appear to shift and change constantly, unstably. Objects would look like they were changing color every single time the light source changed. You'd walk from room to room and everything would look different. It would be disorienting, confusing, exhausting. This stability, this constancy, helps you move through the world without confusion, without constantly questioning what you're looking at. To understand how this works, how automatic and essential it is, think about walking through your house during the day. Sunlight pours in through the windows in the morning, creating one type of light, bright and slightly blue. Later, as evening falls and night arrives, you turn on indoor lights, which create a completely different type of light with a much warmer yellow or orange tone. Even though the lighting has changed drastically, the walls still look like they're painted the same color. Your furniture looks the same. Everything feels consistent. This happens because your brain constantly adjusts the signals coming from your eyes to keep colors consistent, stable, recognizable. The brain uses information from the surrounding scene, things like shadows, reflections, other objects, to figure out what the actual true color of an object is supposed to be. It's solving a problem, making a calculation, every single moment. This process is incredibly useful most of the time, but it can sometimes cause fascinating mistakes, surprising disagreements. A perfect, well-known example is the viral photo of a dress that exploded across the internet back in 2015. You might remember it. Some people looked at the photo and saw the dress as clearly white and gold. Others looked at the exact same photo and saw it as obviously blue and black. The photo itself didn't change. The pixels were identical. Yet people strongly, passionately disagreed about what they were looking at. Friends argued, families debated. The disagreement spread like wildfire because it revealed something unsettling. How differently, how subjectively, the brain can interpret the exact same image. The reason for this dramatic disagreement came down entirely to how each person's brain interpreted the lighting in that particular photo. The picture had almost no clear, obvious clues about whether the dress was photographed in shadow, in dim light, or under bright light. The context was ambiguous, unclear. Some people's brains assumed the dress was in shadow, in darker lighting, and automatically adjusted the colors as if the lighting was dim. These people saw the dress as white and gold. Other people's brains assumed the dress was brightly lit, in full light, and adjusted the colors in the completely opposite way. They saw it as blue and black. Both groups, both interpretations, were using completely normal, healthy color constancy processes. There was nothing wrong with anyone's eyes or brain, but because the context, the surrounding information, was so unclear and ambiguous, their brains reached totally different answers, different conclusions. This simple photo shows us powerfully how much color constancy depends on surrounding information, on context, and how subjective perception can really be. In most real-world situations, thankfully, the brain has plenty of context, plenty of clues. When you see a red apple hanging on a tree, the green leaves around it, the brown branches, the blue sky above, all of these give your brain clear, reliable clues about the lighting. If the apple is in shadow, your brain knows automatically to adjust for the darker light. If the apple is in direct, bright sun, it adjusts for the intensity. In a flat photograph like the dress image, many of these clues are simply missing, stripped away. So the brain has to guess, has to make assumptions. And that guess can differ dramatically from person to person based on their individual experiences and expectations. Consider another everyday example. You're sitting at a restaurant with dim, romantic lighting. A white plate is set in front of you. That plate still looks white to you even though the actual light shining on it is dark yellow or orange from the candles and lamps. Your brain compares the plate automatically to other objects in the room, like the tablecloth, the color of the food, the walls, and figures out, calculates, that the plate itself hasn't actually changed color. The lighting changed, not the plate. This adjustment helps you eat comfortably without confusion because you can still accurately tell which foods are which, what everything is, even in unusual, colored lighting. Without this automatic correction, a perfectly normal steak might look green or blue or purple under certain colored lamps, making it much harder to recognize, maybe even unappetizing. Artists and photographers have long understood deeply, intimately, how light affects color perception. A painter working carefully in a studio knows from experience that the same tube of paint, the exact same color, can look surprisingly different depending on whether it's viewed under natural daylight streaming through a window or under artificial light from a bulb. Photographers deal with this exact problem constantly through white balance settings on their cameras. These technical settings mimic, they replicate, what the human brain does automatically. They correct for the color temperature of the light so that the colors in the final photo match what people expect to see, what looks natural. If the white balance is set incorrectly, even slightly off, the entire image can take on a strange, unnatural tint, looking far too blue, too orange, too green. It looks wrong, off, unpleasant. Color constancy also plays a crucial role in safety, in preventing accidents. Traffic lights are designed very carefully with clear, distinct red, yellow, and green signals so that drivers can identify them instantly, at a glance, no matter what time of day it is, no matter what kind of weather is present, rain or fog or bright sun. If the brain didn't maintain color stability automatically, a red light might look completely different at dawn than it does at noon, which could easily lead to confusion, missed signals, accidents. Manufacturers test these critical colors extensively under many different lighting conditions to make absolutely sure they remain recognizable and consistent. The effect can be seen clearly in retail stores as well, something shoppers experience all the time without realizing it. Clothing often looks noticeably different under store lights than it does outside in natural sunlight. Store lighting may have a slightly warm or cool tint, deliberately chosen, that changes subtly how colors appear. A shirt that looks one particular shade in the fitting room under those lights may look completely different, maybe disappointingly different, when you step outside in sunlight later. Your brain works hard to correct the color in both situations, adjusting constantly, but because the surrounding cues, the context, are so different, the final perception may shift noticeably. This is exactly why people sometimes return clothes after buying them, realizing they don't quite match what they expected, what they thought they saw in the store. An everyday scenario shows just how much the brain depends on context on the whole scene. Imagine you're sitting peacefully in a park at sunset. The light is soft, warm, glowing orange and pink, but the white pages of the book you're reading still look white to you, not orange. This happens because your brain takes in the entire scene at once. The color of the grass, the shadows of the trees, the fading sky. It uses all of that rich information together to keep the page color stable, consistent, recognizable as white. If someone were to take a photograph of that exact same scene with a camera, the camera would probably capture the page as orange, tinted, because cameras lack the brain's sophisticated ability to adjust in real time based on context. Research on color constancy helps explain why people sometimes argue, sometimes disagree, about color descriptions. Two people might look at the same car parked on the street and describe its color slightly differently, especially under mixed lighting conditions like cloudy skies or street lamps at night. Each person's brain is making slightly different corrections, different calculations, based on what they individually expect the light to be, based on their unique experiences. This doesn't mean either person is wrong or right. It means their brains are solving the same problem in slightly different ways. Designers and engineers use this knowledge carefully when creating visual displays for critical environments. For example, in hospitals, medical monitors must show absolutely accurate colors so that staff can read vital signs correctly, reliably. If the display colors shifted under different room lighting, it could cause dangerous confusion and serious errors. Similarly, airplane cockpits are designed meticulously so that warning lights remain perfectly consistent and clear no matter what lighting conditions exist outside the plane, whether it's bright day or dark night. Color constancy also affects how people interpret images on screens, something we all experience daily. When you watch a movie on your phone or television, the lighting in the room around you influences significantly what you actually see on screen. If you're watching in a completely dark room, the colors may appear more vivid, more saturated, more intense. In bright sunlight, those same colors may seem washed out, faded, harder to see. Your brain works constantly to correct for this, adjusting, but it can only do so much without full context, without all the information. This is exactly why professional video editors always use carefully controlled lighting in their workspaces to ensure that what they see on their monitors matches what viewers will see later in different environments. A simple way to test color constancy yourself to see it in action is to take a piece of colored paper, maybe red or blue, and place it under several different light sources. Try it under a desk lamp, then under natural sunlight, then under a fluorescent bulb. The paper will look slightly, subtly different in each setting, but you'll still recognize its true color. Your brain uses the surrounding environment, the context, to keep the color stable even as the light changes dramatically. If you take a photo of that paper in each setting with a camera, the differences will be much more obvious, much more dramatic, because the camera lacks the brain's automatic, intelligent adjustment. The viral dress debate became so incredibly popular, so widespread, because it made this normally hidden process suddenly visible to everyone. Most of the time, people don't think at all about how their brains are constantly correcting colors. They assume everyone sees exactly the same thing they do. When that photo spread rapidly online, it revealed just how much variation, how much subjectivity there can be in basic perception. Two people could look at the exact same image, the exact same pixels, and see completely, totally different colors. Each person was certain, absolutely convinced they were correct. This simple photo, this one dress, opened a fascinating window into how complex, how subjective, and how fragile color perception truly can be. It showed clearly that what we see is shaped by both the eyes and the brain working together, and sometimes they disagree. Auditory illusions. Auditory illusions occur when the brain misinterprets sound, when it hears something that isn't quite there or mistakes one sound for another. They work very much like visual illusions, but involve hearing instead of sight. The ears receive sound waves traveling through the air, vibrations, and send them as electrical signals to the brain, where they're processed, analyzed, and understood as voices, music, noises, words. Most of the time, this process works beautifully, seamlessly. You can identify voices of friends, you can recognize songs, you can distinguish everyday noises without any difficulty. However, when sound is unclear, ambiguous, muffled, or when it contains conflicting information, mixed frequencies, the brain must make a decision, must choose what it's hearing. In these moments, perception can be shaped powerfully by expectations, by context, and even by physical differences in each person's hearing ability. This leads to very different, sometimes completely opposite experiences for different listeners. A well-known, perfect example is the Laurel versus Yanni recording that went viral across the internet in 2018. People were asked to listen to a short audio clip, just a few seconds long, and report what word they heard. Some listeners clearly, obviously heard the word Laurel. Others were equally certain, just as confident, they heard the word Yanni. The debate spread like wildfire across social media as friends, families, co-workers argued passionately about which word was correct, which word was really there. The fascinating, revealing part is that the sound file itself never changed. The audio was identical for everyone. The difference came entirely from how each individual person's brain processed the same set of frequencies, the same sound waves. The clip contained a mixture of low frequencies and high frequencies blended together. The word laurel was more dominant, more present in the lower frequencies. The word Yanni appeared more clearly in the higher frequencies. If a listener's hearing was naturally more sensitive to lower frequencies, they tended strongly to hear laurel. If they were more sensitive to higher frequencies, they tended to hear Yanni. Age plays a significant role in this difference. As people grow older, they gradually, inevitably lose the ability to hear higher frequencies. It's a natural part of aging. This means that younger people, teenagers and young adults, were statistically more likely to hear Yanni. Older listeners were more likely to hear laurel. Their ears simply couldn't pick up those higher frequencies as well anymore. Context also influenced the perception dramatically. If someone told you in advance before you listened that the clip said laurel, your brain was much more likely to lock onto that interpretation, to hear it that way. The same thing happened with Yanni. This shows powerfully how expectations, suggestions, can shift what you think you hear. The brain tries hard to make sense of ambiguous information by using hints from the environment, from what you've been told, from what you expect. Even a simple suggestion, a single word, can shift your entire perception. A similar phenomenon happens constantly in everyday life. Imagine you're at a crowded party. Many conversations are happening all around you at once, creating a noisy jumble of voices. Suddenly, clearly, you hear your name spoken by someone across the room. Your brain instantly pulls that sound out of the background, brings it forward because it's personally meaningful to you. This is sometimes called the cocktail party effect. The reverse can also happen. If you expect to hear a certain phrase or word, your brain might hear it even when it's not there, filling in gaps based on expectation rather than reality. Have you ever noticed how the words someone uses can completely change how you feel about something? It's fascinating, really. Picture this. You're sitting in a doctor's office, and your doctor tells you that a certain medical procedure has a 90% survival rate. You feel pretty good about that, right? The odds seem favorable. You breathe a little easier knowing that 9 out of 10 people make it through just fine. But now imagine the same doctor, in the same office with the same procedure, tells you instead that it has a 10% mortality rate. Suddenly, your heart sinks. The room feels colder. You start thinking about that one person out of 10 who doesn't make it, and you wonder if that could be you. Here's the interesting part. Both statements are describing the exact same reality. The numbers are identical. The procedure hasn't changed. The risk is still the same. But the way the information is presented, the words that are chosen, completely changes how you react emotionally. The first statement frames everything positively. It focuses on survival, on making it through, on the people who walk out healthy. The second statement does the opposite. It focuses on death, on the people who don't survive, on what could go wrong. This isn't magic, it's just framing. And it's one of the most powerful psychological tools that shapes how we make decisions every single day, often without us even realizing it. This effect doesn't just happen in serious situations like medical decisions. It shows up everywhere in the most ordinary moments of your daily life. Let's say you're at the grocery store. You're in the meat section looking for ground beef. You're probably hungry, maybe a little tired from work, just trying to pick something for dinner tonight. You see 2 packages sitting side by side. One says 90% lean, the other says 10% fat. Which one do you reach for? If you're like most people, you grab the one that says 90% lean. It just feels healthier, cleaner, better. But wait a second, think about this. Both packages contain exactly the same amount of fat. The actual product is identical. The nutritional content is the same, but the way the label presents the information makes one seem appealing and the other seem less appetizing. The negative frame, the one that mentions fat, makes the product seem unhealthy. The positive frame, the one that talks about being lean, makes it seem like the better choice. The difference is not in what you're buying, it's in how the information is packaged for your brain to process. Now let's think about money, because framing affects how people view financial decisions too. Imagine you're sitting with an investment advisor in a quiet office. There are charts on the wall, maybe a picture of a family, some books on a shelf. The advisor leans forward and says, "This fund has a 70% chance of making a profit." You nod. That sounds pretty good. 70%, more than half. You feel optimistic. You might even start imagining what you'll do with the money you earn. But what if the same advisor, with the same fund, with the same data, says instead, "This fund has a 30% chance of losing money"? Now you hesitate. 30% doesn't sound like a small risk anymore. You start thinking about what you could lose, about bills, about your savings, about playing it safe. The probabilities are exactly the same in both cases, but the first frame encourages you to take a risk, while the second frame makes you want to pull back. The wording, the framing, doesn't just provide information. It shapes how you feel about that information and what you decide to do next. This is why financial advisors, salespeople, and marketers choose their words so carefully. They understand that the framing can be just as important as the facts. The framing effect plays a huge role in public policy and how people vote too. Think about it. Lawmakers and campaign strategists spend hours debating how to describe their proposals because they know the words matter. A tax plan described as tax relief feels supportive. It sounds like help, like someone is lifting a burden off your shoulders. You can almost feel the weight being removed, but the same plan, if described as a tax burden, suddenly feels heavy and unfair. It sounds oppressive, like something being forced on you that you don't want to carry. Both descriptions might involve the exact same changes to the tax code. The numbers, the policies, the outcomes could all be identical, but the emotional tone of the message affects how voters perceive them. People respond to feelings, not just facts. And often, they don't even notice that their reaction is being driven more by the wording than by the actual content of the proposal. Let's move into the workplace now, because managers can shape employee motivation through framing in really subtle ways. Imagine a manager standing in front of their team, explaining a new performance system. The manager says employees who meet their goals will earn a bonus. The room perks up. People start thinking about what they could do with that extra money. Maybe a vacation, maybe paying off some debt, maybe just a nice dinner out. The focus is on gaining a reward, on achieving something positive. But now imagine the same manager, with the same system, says instead, employees who fail to meet their goals will miss out on a bonus. Suddenly, the mood shifts. People start feeling anxious. They're thinking about what they might lose, about being left out, about not being good enough. Even though both statements describe the exact same rule, the same system, the first frame creates excitement and motivation, while the second creates stress and fear. The difference in tone can affect not just how employees approach their work, but how they feel about their jobs in general, whether they feel energized or drained at the end of the day. Framing also affects negotiations in powerful ways. Suppose you're at a car dealership. You've been looking at a vehicle for a while now, walking around it, checking the interior, imagining yourself driving it home. The salesperson walks over with a friendly smile and says, "I can give you a $2,000 discount on this vehicle." You feel great. You feel like you're getting a good deal. You start thinking you're smart for negotiating, for being here at the right time. But what if the salesperson instead says, "If you don't act now, you'll miss out on a $2,000 discount"? Now you feel pressured. There's urgency. You don't want to lose something. The framing here plays on something psychologists call loss aversion. It's the idea that people dislike losses more than they enjoy equivalent gains. By framing the same discount either as a gain or as a loss, the salesperson can influence your emotions and push you toward making a quicker decision. The discount itself hasn't changed, but your feelings about it have. Research shows that negative frames often have a stronger impact than positive ones. This happens because your brain reacts more intensely to potential losses than to potential gains. It's wired that way for survival reasons. For example, in health messaging, telling people that not exercising increases their risk of disease can be more effective at changing behavior than telling them that exercising improves health. The negative frame creates a sense of urgency, a sense of threat. It grabs your attention in a way that positive messages sometimes don't. However, if you overuse negative framing, it can backfire. It can cause stress, anxiety, or even resistance. People start tuning out because the constant negativity becomes overwhelming, so it must be used carefully, with balance and awareness of how people are responding. Consider how this plays out in parenting too. A parent might say to their child, "If you study, you will do well on the test." This frames studying as a path to success as something positive. The child can picture themselves feeling proud, getting praise, maybe even celebrating. But the same parent might say instead, "If you don't study, you will fail the test." Now the child is thinking about failure, about disappointment, about what happens when things go wrong. Both messages communicate the same basic idea: study and the result will be better. But the first message encourages effort through positive motivation. The child is moving towards something good. The second message uses fear of failure. The child is trying to avoid something bad. How a child responds may depend on which frame is used, which emotional pathway is triggered in their mind. The framing effect is especially important in situations involving uncertainty, times when people do not have complete information and are trying to make the best choice they can. Imagine a medical trial for a new treatment. If researchers report that the treatment saves 70 out of 100 patients, it sounds promising. You think about the 70 people who walked away healthier. But if the same researchers report that 30 out of 100 patients died despite treatment, it sounds alarming. You think about the 30 who didn't make it. Both statements describe the exact same outcome. The data has not changed, but the framing can influence how patients feel about trying the treatment, how doctors feel about prescribing it, and how regulators feel about approving it. Perception becomes reality in decision-making, even when the facts remain constant. Framing can also affect group decisions in team settings. Picture a team meeting in a conference room. There's coffee on the table, notebooks open, maybe a whiteboard with notes. The manager stands up and says, "We have a 60% chance of meeting our goals this quarter." The team feels motivated. They start brainstorming strategies, talking about opportunities, feeling energized. But if the manager says instead, "We have a 40% chance of missing our goals," the mood changes. Now the team is focused on risks, on obstacles, on what might go wrong. The same data, the same 60-40 split, but the shift in focus changes not only the mood in the room, but also the strategies the team develops. They might become more cautious, more defensive, less willing to take creative risks. The way a problem is framed shapes the entire conversation that follows. The effect even extends to personal finances in ways you might not expect. Imagine a credit card company describing fees. If the company says you will save 5% if you pay with cash, the frame is positive. You feel like you're getting a reward for choosing cash. But if the company says you will be charged 5% extra for using a card, the frame is negative. Now it feels like a penalty, like you're being punished. Many customers will react more strongly to the idea of an extra charge than to the idea of a discount, even though both describe the exact same difference in cost. This is why businesses spend so much time carefully choosing how to frame prices, discounts, and offers. They know that the way information is presented can directly impact sales. Framing doesn't only influence individuals, it shapes public conversations and debates as well. During discussions about environmental issues, for example, one group might frame an initiative as protecting natural resources. It sounds caring, responsible, forward-thinking. Another group might frame the same initiative as restricting economic growth. Now it sounds limiting, harmful to jobs, bad for business. Both frames describe the same policy, the same proposal, but they highlight different values. The chosen frame can determine whether people support or oppose the policy, even before they dig into the details, even before they look at the actual data or consider the long-term consequences. Let me give you an everyday example that shows just how subtle framing can be. Imagine two friends planning dinner. They're both hungry, trying to decide where to eat. One friend says, "We have a 70% chance of getting a table at that restaurant without a reservation." The other friend says, "There's a 30% chance we won't get a table." Both statements are mathematically identical. The odds are the same, but the first one feels optimistic. It makes you want to try. The second one feels pessimistic. It makes you think maybe we should just go somewhere else. The difference in framing can be the deciding factor in where they end up eating, even though the actual situation hasn't changed at all. Framing also affects memory and how events are recalled later. If a news report describes a protest as peaceful, viewers may later remember it as calm and orderly. They picture people holding signs, walking quietly, maybe chanting, but in a controlled way. If the same protest is described as a riot, viewers may recall it as violent and chaotic. They picture broken windows, shouting, confrontation. Even if the actual footage shown was the same, the words used to describe it shape how the event is stored in memory. The frame not only influences the immediate reaction, but it also changes how people remember and talk about the event days, weeks, or even years later. This effect shows just how important language and presentation are in all forms of communication, from news to conversations to advertisements. People like to think they make decisions based purely on facts. We imagine ourselves as logical, rational beings who weigh evidence and come to conclusions. But the framing effect reveals something important. Facts are rarely experienced in isolation. They come wrapped in words, in images, in tone. The words that are chosen, the order in which information is given, the emotional context, all of these play a major role in shaping judgment. By paying attention to framing, both in how others present information to you and in how you present information to others, you can better understand how choices are influenced. You can take steps to focus on the core facts rather than just the way they are packaged. You can ask yourself, is this making me feel a certain way on purpose? Is there another way to look at this same information? These questions create space for clearer thinking and better decisions. Now let's shift gears and talk about something called negativity bias. This is the tendency for negative experiences, thoughts, and emotions to affect us more strongly than positive ones. Your brain gives greater weight to bad news, to painful memories, to criticism, than it does to compliments, pleasant experiences, or good news. Think about it for a moment. You could receive 10 compliments in a day, but it's that one critical comment that stays with you, that replays in your mind as you're lying in bed at night. That's negativity bias at work. This bias developed as a survival tool way back in early human history. Back then, noticing danger quickly was far more important than noticing things that were safe or pleasant. A person who paid close attention to threats, like a predator lurking nearby or a poisonous plant growing along the path, had a much better chance of surviving than someone who ignored those warnings. Over thousands and thousands of years, this tendency became hardwired into how the brain works. It's built into the structure, into the way information is processed. And today, even though most of the threats we face are not life or death situations, the same system is still operating in the background, shaping how we think, feel, and behave. You can see negativity bias in everyday interactions if you just pay attention. Imagine a manager giving feedback to an employee in a quiet office. During the meeting, the manager shares several positive comments about the employee's work. They talk about projects that went well, about effort and dedication, about skills that are improving. And then at the end, they offer one piece of criticism, maybe about a missed deadline or a detail that could have been handled better. When the employee leaves that office, what do you think they're focused on? It's not the praise, it's the criticism. They replay that one negative comment in their mind over and over, sometimes for hours or even days. The positive feedback fades quickly, like it was never said at all, while the negative comment lingers and grows heavier. Even though the manager said far more good things than bad, the employee walks away feeling discouraged. This happens because the brain treats negative information as more urgent, more important, more worth remembering. This bias affects relationships in deep and lasting ways. In a marriage or a close friendship, one argument can feel far more powerful than many moments of kindness. If a couple has a small fight in the morning, maybe over something trivial like dishes or plans, that negative moment can shape the mood for the entire day. The kind words spoken later, the small gestures of affection, may not fully erase the sting of that fight. Researchers have actually found that in healthy relationships, positive interactions must outnumber negative ones by a really wide margin just to keep the relationship stable and happy. Some studies suggest a ratio of about 5-to-1. That means it takes roughly 5 positive moments to balance out just one negative interaction. A single insult, one hurtful action, can outweigh several acts of care or appreciation. That's how powerful negativity bias is. Negativity bias also shapes how people remember events from their past. Think about a childhood memory for a moment. Close your eyes if you can and picture something from when you were young. What comes to mind? For many people, it's the embarrassing moments, the painful ones, being teased at school, failing a test, saying something wrong in front of the class. These memories are vivid, sharp, detailed. You can remember the room, the faces, even the feeling in your chest. But positive memories, like a fun birthday party or a compliment from a teacher, they often feel less sharp. Sometimes they fade away entirely. This difference is not because negative events happen more often. It's because the brain stores them more deeply. It treats them as more important. The extra focus on negative memories makes them easier to recall later, and that influences how we see ourselves, how we make decisions, and what we believe about the world. Consider giving a presentation at work. You stand in front of a group, you've prepared, you deliver your talk. Most people respond positively. They nod, they smile, maybe they even clap at the end. But there's one person in the back who frowns or asks a tough question in a skeptical tone. What do you think about afterward? If you're like most people, you dwell on that one negative reaction. You replay it in your mind, you wonder what they were thinking. You question whether your entire presentation was actually good, or if you just missed something important. Even though the majority of the feedback was positive, your mind keeps circling back to that single moment of doubt or criticism. This imbalance between how you process positive and negative input can lead to distorted self-perception. It can create unnecessary stress and make you feel worse about your performance than the reality justifies. The media amplify this effect in a big way. Negative stories grab attention much faster than positive ones. A report about a natural disaster, a violent crime, or a political scandal spreads quickly across networks and social media. People are wired to pay attention to danger, to threats, to things that could harm them. Media outlets understand this deeply, and they often focus on dramatic or upsetting stories because they know those stories will get more clicks, more views, more engagement. This creates a cycle. Viewers are exposed to more and more negative content, which reinforces their belief that the world is unsafe, chaotic, or getting worse. Even if the actual rate of crime or disasters is stable, or even declining, the constant stream of negative news makes it feel like everything is falling apart. People start to believe the world is more dangerous than it really is, simply because that's what they see most often. Negativity bias also plays a big role in workplace culture. If employees hear one rumor about layoffs, it can overshadow months of positive announcements about company growth or stability. Fear spreads quickly through an office. People start making decisions based on worst-case scenarios. They update their resumes. They stop investing energy in long-term projects. Managers have to work much harder to communicate positive developments because those messages simply do not carry the same emotional weight as negative ones. A single piece of bad news, even if it's just a rumor, can undo weeks or even months of effort to build trust and morale. That's the imbalance negativity bias creates in group dynamics. The bias is visible in education settings too. A student who receives mostly good grades, A's and B's across the board, might fixate on the one poor grade, maybe a C or a D on a single assignment. Even if that grade represents only a small part of their overall performance, it dominates their thoughts. It lowers their confidence. They start to believe they're not good at the subject, or worse, that they're not smart. Teachers often find that students remember critical comments much more clearly than encouraging ones. A teacher might praise a student 10 times and correct them once, but it's that one correction that sticks. This can affect motivation, how students approach learning, and even their long-term academic identity. Evolutionary psychology offers an explanation for why negativity bias exists in the first place. In the ancient past, missing a threat could have been fatal. If you failed to notice a snake hiding in the grass or a storm approaching on the horizon, you might not survive. Your genes wouldn't get passed on. Missing a positive event, like a fruit tree or a safe shelter, was far less dangerous. You could find food or shelter another day. As a result, the brain evolved to prioritize negative signals. It became biased toward caution, toward noticing what could go wrong. Modern life is very different. We don't face predators or constant physical danger, but the same ancient system is still operating. This is why a harsh email from your boss can feel like a genuine threat, even though it doesn't pose any physical danger. Your body reacts with stress hormones. Your heart rate might increase. You feel the urge to fight or flee, even when the situation only involves words on a screen. This bias affects financial decisions as well. Investors tend to react more strongly to losses than to gains. If someone gains $100, they feel good, but the feeling is mild and fades relatively quickly. If they lose $100, the feeling is much more intense and it lasts much longer. This imbalance can lead to overly cautious behavior in investing. People might avoid risks that could bring long-term benefits because the fear of losing feels so much stronger than the hope of winning. They hold on to bad investments too long, hoping to avoid realizing a loss. They sell good investments too quickly, afraid that gains will disappear. The emotional weight of loss distorts rational decision-making. In healthcare, negativity bias influences how patients respond to diagnosis and treatment options. A patient might focus heavily on the possible side effects of a medication rather than its benefits. Even if the chance of side effects is small, say 5%, the negative information feels more real, more threatening. The doctor might explain that 95% of people tolerate the medication just fine, but the patient's mind keeps circling back to that 5% who don't. This can lead patients to refuse treatments that would genuinely help them, simply because the potential harm feels more vivid and more likely than the potential good. Social interactions are deeply shaped by this bias as well. Suppose you're at a party and you meet 10 new people. 9 of them are friendly, warm, and kind. One person makes a rude comment or gives you a dismissive look. When you think back on the night later, which encounter stands out most? It's almost always the rude one. It colors how you remember the entire event. You might even tell friends, the party was okay, but there was this one person, and then you describe the negative interaction in detail. The 9 positive encounters fade into the background. This happens because the brain gives more attention and more memory resources to threats, including social threats like rejection, criticism, or rudeness. Negativity bias can deeply affect parenting as well. A child may receive praise for good behavior many times throughout the week, but one instance of scolding, one moment where a parent raises their voice or expresses disappointment, can have a much stronger and longer-lasting effect on the child's memory and emotions. Parents often notice that children seem far more sensitive to criticism than to compliments. Over time, if a child hears too many negative messages, even if they're mixed with praise, they may develop low self-esteem, anxiety, or a belief that they're not good enough. The negative messages carry more weight, and they shape the child's self-image in powerful ways. In team settings, negativity spreads quickly and powerfully. If one team member constantly complains, their negative energy can influence the mood and mindset of the whole group. Positive comments from other team members may not be enough to balance it out because those comments simply don't have the same emotional weight. This is why leaders often work so hard to prevent negativity from taking root in a team. Once a negative mood or mindset spreads, it takes significant, sustained effort to restore balance and optimism. You can't just offer one positive comment to counter one negative comment. You often need several, delivered consistently over time. Let me give you a simple example from daily life that really illustrates this bias. Imagine you receive 10 text messages in one day. 9 of them are kind, supportive, maybe funny or encouraging. 1 of them is critical, maybe even rude or dismissive. When you go to bed that night, which message replays in your mind? It's almost always the negative one. You might even forget the positive messages entirely, like they never arrived. You lie there thinking about that one critical text, wondering what it means, how to respond, whether the person is upset with you. This shows how dramatically a single bad moment can outweigh multiple good ones, simply because of how your brain is wired to prioritize threats and negativity. Because negativity bias is built into the structure of the brain, it cannot be completely eliminated. It's part of being human, but being aware of it can help you understand your own reactions and manage them more effectively. When you notice that one piece of criticism feels overwhelming, you can pause, you can take a breath, you can remind yourself of the full context of all the positive feedback you've received. Of all the things that are going well, this awareness creates mental space. It allows you to respond more thoughtfully rather than letting that one negative event control your feelings, your mood, and your decisions for the rest of the day or week. Even though negative experiences will always have extra power, you can consciously work to focus on positive ones as well, to give them more attention, more weight. This helps bring balance and reduces the distortion that negativity bias naturally creates in how you see yourself, others, and the world around you. Now let's talk about something called the halo effect. This is when one positive trait of a person influences how we see everything else about them. When someone makes a good first impression, that impression spreads outward like a glowing halo, and it colors all of our other judgments about them. If you notice one thing you like, you're far more likely to assume that other parts of that person are also good, even when you have no evidence to support those assumptions. The effect works quietly in the background of your mind, shaping your opinions without you even realizing it's happening. Physical appearance is one of the most common and powerful triggers of the halo effect. Imagine you meet someone who is very attractive. Maybe they have a warm smile, clear skin, nice clothes, good posture. Because of their looks, you might automatically assume they're also kind, intelligent, trustworthy, and capable. You haven't had a real conversation yet. You don't know anything about their character, their skills, or their values, but your brain has already filled in the gaps. This happens because the brain likes shortcuts. It uses the information it already has, in this case attractiveness, and extends that positive impression to other qualities. Over time, those assumptions influence how you treat the person, how you interpret their actions, and what opportunities you offer them. Here's a common scenario that plays out in hiring decisions all the time. Suppose a manager is interviewing candidates for an important job. The first candidate walks in well-dressed, confident, speaking smoothly and clearly. The manager immediately feels impressed. There's a positive feeling in the room. Later, when the manager is reviewing resumes and comparing qualifications, they might give more weight to that candidate's skills and experience, even if another applicant actually has stronger qualifications on paper. The positive first impression acts like a filter. It makes every detail about that person seem better, more impressive, more trustworthy than it might actually be. This is one reason why some companies now use structured interviews, standardized questions, and scoring systems. They're trying to reduce bias and make sure decisions are based on actual qualifications, not just on how someone looks or how they made the interviewer feel in the first few minutes. The halo effect also works in the opposite direction, and when it does, it's sometimes called the horn effect. If someone has a quality that stands out as negative, like being late to a meeting or dressing sloppily, you might assume they are careless or unprofessional in other areas too. For example, if a coworker misses one deadline, you might start to believe they're unreliable in general, even if they've met every other deadline on time for months. Both the halo effect and the horn effect show how a single characteristic, whether positive or negative, can shape an overall opinion that goes far beyond that one trait. In education, teachers often experience the halo effect in grading without even realizing it. A student who speaks confidently in class, who always turns in neat, well-organized work, who makes eye contact and participates actively, that student might receive higher grades on essays or tests, even if their actual writing or answers are only average. The teacher's positive impression of the student as hardworking, smart, or engaged influences how they evaluate the work itself. This isn't intentional, teachers aren't trying to be unfair, but the bias operates unconsciously. Similarly, a quiet student who struggles to participate, who turns in work that looks messy or rushed, may have their work judged more harshly, even if the content is of equal quality to the confident student's work. The overall impression created by behavior and presentation affects academic outcomes in ways that can be hard to see or measure. Marketing relies heavily on the halo effect, and companies invest huge amounts of money into it. When a well-known celebrity endorses a product, they bring their positive traits, like charm, popularity, success, attractiveness, to the brand. Consumers may assume that the product is high quality simply because they like the person promoting it. The actual features of the product, its real performance, its value, all of that becomes secondary to the emotional connection people have with the celebrity. This is why companies spend millions of dollars on endorsements and sponsorships. They're not just buying attention, they're buying the halo that comes with that celebrity's image, and they're hoping it transfers to their product in the minds of consumers. Politics provides another really clear example of the halo effect in action. A candidate who appears confident, charismatic, and polished during a debate can gain significant support, even if their actual policies are unclear, contradictory, or not well thought out. Voters may assume that because the candidate seems strong, trustworthy, and likable, their ideas must also be good. The first impression, that sense of confidence and charm, takes over. People may stop questioning the details. They stop digging into policy proposals or past voting records. They just feel good about the candidate, and that feeling becomes the basis for their vote. This can lead to decisions based far more on personality and presentation than on actual substance or qualifications. Consider a social situation. You meet someone at a party who is funny, engaging, and easy to talk to. You immediately like them. You feel comfortable. You assume they're also trustworthy, reliable, and kind. Later, if they cancel plans or show up late to something, you're far more likely to excuse their behavior. You might think, oh, they're just busy, or maybe something came up. But if someone you disliked or felt neutral about did the exact same thing, you'd probably judge it much more harshly. You might think, typical, they're so unreliable. The halo effect shapes not only your first impressions, but also how you interpret later actions. It creates a lens through which you view everything that person does, and that lens is tinted by that initial positive glow. The halo effect is so powerful because it happens automatically and instantly. Your brain processes huge amounts of information every single second. To save energy and time, it relies on shortcuts. And the halo effect is one of those shortcuts. When you have one strong, clear piece of positive information, your brain uses it to predict other traits. It fills in the blanks. This process is efficient. It helps you make quick social decisions, but it can also lead to distorted, inaccurate judgments, especially when that first piece of information isn't actually related to the qualities you're assuming. Retail environments are carefully designed to trigger this bias. A store that looks clean, well organized, and beautifully lit makes you assume that the products inside are also high quality. Even if the actual items are no different from those in a messy, poorly lit store, your perception of them changes. The positive impression of the space, the environment, spreads to everything inside it. You're more willing to pay higher prices. You trust the brand more. You feel better about your purchase. Restaurants use the exact same principle. If the decor is stylish, if the staff is polite and well-dressed, if the lighting and music create a pleasant atmosphere, you may believe the food will taste better even before you try it. The environment creates a halo that influences your entire experience, including how you judge the actual quality of the meal. The halo effect can even influence legal settings in really serious ways. A defendant who appears well-groomed, respectful, calm, and articulate in court may receive a lighter sentence than someone who looks disheveled, angry, or unfriendly, even if both cases involve similar charges and similar evidence. Judges and juries are human. Their perceptions are shaped by the same unconscious biases as everyone else. This is why defense lawyers spend so much time carefully planning how their clients present themselves during trials. They choose clothing, they coach behavior, they manage appearance, because they know that these factors, which have nothing to do with guilt or innocence, can still affect the outcome of the case. In sports, the halo effect can lead to unequal treatment of athletes. A player with natural charisma, strong leadership qualities, or a compelling personal story may receive more praise, more media attention, and more playing time, even if another player has better performance statistics. Coaches and fans may see what they expect to see, and their overall positive impression filters how they interpret every play, every decision, every moment on the field. This can affect careers, team dynamics, and even who gets opportunities to advance to higher levels of competition. Parents sometimes experience the halo effect with their own children. If one child is labeled early on as the responsible one, the smart one, or the easy one, a parent might assume they always tell the truth and always make good choices. Even when evidence suggests otherwise, when there are signs of trouble or mistakes, the label sticks. The parent's perception is filtered through that halo. Another child who gets labeled as difficult or as the troublemaker may have their positive actions overlooked or dismissed. These patterns can shape family relationships for years, influencing how siblings see themselves, how they relate to each other, and how they develop their own identities. The workplace is absolutely full of subtle halos that affect decisions every single day. Imagine a team member who is great at public speaking. They're confident in meetings. They present ideas clearly. They command attention. Because of this one skill, colleagues might assume they're also good at leadership, at project management, at problem solving, even if they've never actually demonstrated those abilities. When a new project comes up, that person may be chosen to lead simply because of the halo created by their speaking talent. This can lead to mismatched roles, where someone is put in a position they're not actually qualified for, and it can also mean missed opportunities for others who might be better suited, but don't have that same visible, attention-grabbing skill. The halo effect can also show up in reverse in the workplace. If a boss strongly dislikes one trait in an employee, maybe a lack of punctuality or a tendency to speak bluntly, they may start to judge all of that employee's work negatively. Even high-quality contributions, creative ideas, or strong results might be seen as flawed or insufficient because the initial negative impression colors everything else. This demonstrates just how fragile fairness can be when the halo or horn effect is in play. Small, surface-level traits can have outsized influence on major decisions like promotions, raises, or terminations. A common scenario that really highlights this bias is in dating and romantic relationships. When someone is physically attractive, their date might assume they're also kind, intelligent, funny, emotionally mature, and fun to be around. Red flags might be ignored or rationalized away because the positive first impression is so strong, so overwhelming. Over time, as the relationship develops, reality often doesn't match the assumptions that were made at the start. This can lead to disappointment, frustration, or even heartbreak. The person wasn't necessarily dishonest. They just weren't the perfect, idealized version that the halo created in the other person's mind. The halo effect explains why first impressions matter so incredibly much. When you meet someone for the first time, small details like a smile, a tone of voice, the way they're dressed, their posture, their handshake, all of these can set the tone for how you see them from that point forward. Even if you gather more information over time, even if you learn new things that contradict that first impression, the initial impression can be very difficult to change. It sticks. It lingers. This is why people often put so much effort into making a good first impression in job interviews, on first dates, or when meeting new colleagues or clients. They understand, consciously or not, that the impression they create in those first few moments will shape how others view them for a long time to come. Being aware of the halo effect can help you slow down your thinking and question your own assumptions. When you notice yourself forming a strong, positive opinion of someone based on just one trait, you can pause. You can ask yourself, do I actually have enough evidence to support this view? Or am I letting one quality color everything else? This extra step, this moment of reflection, makes it easier to see people more accurately, more fully, beyond just the glow of that first impression. It helps you make better decisions about who to trust, who to hire, who to invest in, and who to build relationships with. It creates space for fairness and for seeing people as they truly are, not just as the halo makes them appear. Now let's move on to the sunk cost fallacy. This happens when people keep putting time, money, or effort into something that's clearly failing, simply because they've already invested in it. This behavior feels so natural, so understandable, but when you really think about it, it's completely irrational. Past costs cannot be recovered, no matter what you do next. They're gone, they're in the past. The only logical choice is to make decisions based on what will happen in the future, on what outcomes you can still affect. Yet so many people, maybe even most people, focus heavily on what they've already spent, and they let that guide their choices, even when walking away would be smarter, healthier, and more beneficial in the long run. Imagine you buy an expensive concert ticket weeks in advance. You're excited, you mark it on your calendar, but then on the day of the show you wake up sick. Your throat is sore, your head is pounding, you feel terrible. You know deep down that you won't enjoy the concert. You'll be miserable sitting there in a crowded venue, trying to focus on the music when all you really want is to be home in bed. But you tell yourself, I have to go, I paid for this ticket. The money is already gone, whether you attend or not. Staying home would actually help you rest and recover faster. But going feels like getting your money's worth, like not wasting the investment. This is a simple, everyday example of the sunk cost fallacy. The past cost, the money you spent weeks ago, pushes you to make a decision that doesn't benefit you at all in the future. You end up sick, exhausted, and miserable at a concert you can't even enjoy. This same pattern appears in much larger, more serious situations. Companies fall into this trap with big projects all the time. Suppose a business spends millions of dollars developing a new product. They invest in research, in design, in marketing plans, in production. Halfway through the process, market research comes back showing that there's actually very little demand for this product. Consumers aren't interested. Competitors have already released something similar. The window of opportunity has closed. The rational choice, the smart business decision, would be to stop spending money immediately and redirect those resources to more promising ideas, to products that actually have a future. Instead, leaders often continue funding the project, pouring more and more money into it because they feel that too much has already been spent to quit now. They think we've already invested millions. We can't just walk away, we have to see it through. They hope, sometimes desperately, that pushing forward will somehow justify all those earlier costs. In many cases, this leads to even bigger losses. The company ends up spending even more money on a product that ultimately fails in the market. Governments face similar challenges, and the stakes can be even higher. A famous example is the continuation of wars or massive public works projects long after evidence clearly shows they're failing, that they're not achieving their goals, that they're causing more harm than good. Leaders fear admitting that past spending was wasted. They fear the political consequences, the criticism, the judgment, so they keep committing resources. They keep sending money, equipment, people, thinking we've already come this far. We've already sacrificed so much. We cannot stop now. This kind of thinking traps them in a terrible cycle where good money follows bad, where resources are drained into something that will never succeed, and citizens, taxpayers, entire populations bear the consequences. The fallacy also appears in personal relationships in really painful ways. A person might stay in an unhealthy, even toxic relationship because they've been with their partner for many years. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10, maybe even longer. They tell themselves that leaving would mean all those years were wasted, that all the time, all the effort, all the compromises, all the memories would suddenly mean nothing. Instead of focusing on whether the relationship will actually bring happiness, fulfillment, or even basic peace in the future, they dwell on the time and effort already spent. They think about anniversaries, about shared experiences, about what they've built together, even if what they've built is crumbling. This focus on the past keeps them stuck in a situation that no longer serves them, that might even be harming them emotionally, mentally, sometimes physically. In education, students sometimes continue with a major they genuinely dislike because they've already completed several classes, maybe even several semesters. They feel it would be a complete waste to start over, to switch majors, to change direction. Even though switching might lead to a much better career, to greater satisfaction, to a life they actually want to live, the past effort feels too valuable, too significant to abandon. They think about the tuition money, the time spent studying, the grades they worked hard for. So they stay on a path that will likely lead to long-term regret, to a career they don't enjoy, to decades of feeling unfulfilled. This behavior is deeply tied to human emotions, especially uncomfortable ones. People really dislike feeling that they've wasted resources, whether that's time, money, energy, or opportunity. Quitting something can feel like admitting failure, and that creates genuine discomfort, even shame. There's a voice in your head that says, you should have known better, you made a mistake, you're giving up. Continuing, even when it makes absolutely no logical sense, can feel like protecting yourself, like protecting your past self from judgment, from criticism, from having to admit that you were wrong. The mind prefers to avoid this painful feeling, so it chooses the path that seems to honor the previous effort, that seems to validate past decisions, even if continuing will cause much more harm in the future. The fallacy is strengthened by commitment, especially public commitment. When someone has made a decision publicly, when they've told others about it, announced it, maybe even celebrated it, they feel enormous pressure to keep going so that others won't see them as inconsistent, weak, or foolish. A manager who promised success on a project to the board of directors might push ahead just to avoid embarrassment, even when every piece of data shows the project is doomed. This need to appear consistent to others, to save face, to protect reputation, can be even stronger than the desire to make the best decision. It overrides logic and leads to decisions that harm not just the individual, but entire teams, entire organizations. Consider a scenario involving personal fitness and health. A person buys an expensive gym membership, maybe paying for a whole year up front to get a discount, but after a few weeks they realize they never enjoy going. The gym is crowded, the equipment intimidates them, the atmosphere doesn't feel welcoming, they dread it every time. Each month they keep paying and they keep forcing themselves to attend, suffering through workouts they hate because they feel they absolutely must get value from their earlier payments. But here's the thing, the money is already spent. It's gone. Whether they go or not, they won't get it back. But they continue to suffer, to waste time, to feel stressed and unhappy, instead of just canceling the membership and finding a physical activity they actually enjoy, like walking, swimming, dancing, yoga, something that brings them joy instead of dread. In this case, the sunk cost fallacy not only wastes money, but it actively reduces their well-being, their quality of life. Entertainment decisions reveal this bias too, in small but telling ways. Someone might sit through an entire bad movie, 2 full hours of boredom or frustration, simply because they paid for the ticket. They think, I spent money on this, I should stay, but walking out wouldn't bring the money back. The ticket cost is the same whether you stay or leave, but staying feels like salvaging the investment, like getting something out of it. In reality, leaving early would actually save you from wasting even more time, your most limited resource, on something you're not enjoying. The same logic applies to finishing a book you dislike. You're halfway through and it's boring, poorly written, not what you expected, but you keep reading because you already invested time. Or continuing a TV series that no longer interests you, watching episode after episode out of obligation rather than enjoyment. the sunk cost isn't just money. It's also time, attention, and energy. Teams and groups can fall victim to this fallacy, and when they do, the effects multiply. Imagine a group of engineers building a new piece of technology. They've been working on it for months, maybe even a year. After all that time, after all those late nights, all those meetings, all those prototypes, they finally realize that a key part of the design will never function properly. The technology just doesn't work the way they hoped. Instead of stopping, accepting the failure, and moving on to something more promising, they keep trying to fix it. They keep pouring hours into it because of all the time already invested. Each additional hour makes them even less willing to quit. They think constantly about what they've already put in rather than what they'll actually get out if they continue. This mindset can lead to burnout. It can lead to team conflict. It can lead to complete project failure when resources could have been redirected to something with real potential. The sunk cost fallacy is incredibly common in gambling, and it can be devastating. A gambler who has lost a large sum, maybe hundreds or thousands of dollars, might keep betting, keep playing in desperate hopes of winning it back. They think, I've already spent so much, I can't stop now. If I just keep going, maybe I'll recover what I lost. But this almost always leads to even bigger losses. The rational choice, the smart choice, would be to stop immediately, accept the past loss as gone, and walk away before losing more. But the emotional desire to recover what's lost, to not feel like it was all for nothing, drives continued risk-taking. It drives people to make bets they can't afford, to chase losses deeper and deeper, until the damage is catastrophic. Friendships can be affected by this too. Someone might keep investing time and energy into a one-sided friendship, a relationship where they're always the one reaching out, always the one making plans, always the one listening, supporting, giving. The other person rarely reciprocates, but they stay in the friendship because they think, we've been friends for years, we have so much history, I can't just let that go. Even if the relationship no longer feels supportive, no longer feels good, they stay because of shared history, because of all the past effort. It would be healthier, better for their well-being to move on, to invest that time and energy into friendships that are mutual, that are fulfilling. But the sunk cost of years spent makes them reluctant to let go. Large organizations face special dangers with this bias because decisions often involve many people, multiple departments, layers of approval. Once a project has consumed significant resources, it becomes incredibly hard to stop because no one wants to be the one who admits the mistake. No one wants to take responsibility for the failure. Group dynamics can magnify the effect. Team members convince each other to keep going. They use phrases like, we've already come so far, or it would be such a waste to quit now, or we just need to push through. These arguments focus entirely on the past rather than the future, and that's the core problem of the fallacy. The past is gone. It can't be changed. Decisions should be based only on what will happen from this point forward. Breaking free from the sunk cost fallacy requires a real shift in focus, a conscious effort to change how you think about decisions. Instead of asking, how much have we already spent, the better, more rational question is, what will bring the best outcome from this point forward? What does the future look like if we continue versus if we stop? The past is gone. It cannot be changed, cannot be recovered, cannot be undone. Decisions should be based only on what happens next, on future costs and future benefits. For example, if a student realizes halfway through college that they truly dislike their chosen major, that they dread the classes, that they can't imagine working in that field, the logical step is to switch, even if it means starting over with new classes, even if it means spending an extra semester or year in school. Continuing just to avoid wasting earlier classes leads to a career they'll likely regret for decades, to a life spent doing work they hate. One really helpful way to see the fallacy clearly is to imagine the decision as if you're starting completely fresh today, with no history, no past investment. If you had no previous involvement with this situation, if you were making the choice for the very first time right now, would you choose to continue? If the honest answer is no, then staying involved only because of past effort is a clear sign of the sunk cost fallacy. This perspective helps separate emotion from logic. It cuts through the attachment to what's already been spent and focuses purely on what makes sense going forward. Consider a couple renovating their house. They're halfway through the project. They've already spent a lot of money, time, energy. Then they discover major structural problems they didn't know about before. The foundation has issues. There's water damage in the walls. The cost to properly finish the renovation will be far, far higher than they ever expected, maybe double or triple the original budget. They might feel absolutely compelled to keep going, to finish what they started, because of all the money already spent. But if they were making this decision today, right now, knowing all the facts, knowing the true cost, they might choose to sell the house as is and move on. By viewing the choice as a fresh start, as if the past spending doesn't exist, they can avoid throwing even more money into a failing project that will drain their finances and their peace of mind. The sunk cost fallacy is deeply, fundamentally human because it touches on pride, on hope, on identity, on fear. People want to believe their efforts matter, that their time and energy and resources weren't wasted, that they made good decisions. Walking away can feel like erasing part of your identity, like admitting you were wrong, like losing something that was important to you. Recognizing this bias doesn't make it easy to overcome. The emotions are real and powerful, but awareness creates space. It creates a moment of pause where you can ask better questions, where you can look at the situation more clearly. By focusing on future outcomes instead of past investments, by asking what will actually make life better from this point forward, individuals and groups can avoid being trapped by losses that simply cannot be undone, no matter how much they wish they could be. Now let's talk about the social proof illusion. This happens when people look to others for cues about what to do, what to think, or what to believe. When many people behave in a certain way, it creates a powerful signal, a message that this behavior must be correct, must be safe, must be popular, must be the right thing to do. This tendency comes from a very basic survival instinct. Way back in early human history, following the group helped individuals stay safe. If everyone in the tribe suddenly started running from danger, or if everyone gathered in one area because there was food or shelter there, going along with them increased your own chance of survival. You didn't need to figure everything out yourself, you just needed to follow the group. Today, thousands of years later, the same instinct is still operating. But instead of predators or shelter, it applies to decisions about products, about opinions, about trends, about what's cool, what's acceptable, what's worth your attention. Imagine you're walking down a busy street in a city. You see two restaurants side by side. One is completely empty. The chairs are vacant, the tables are clean and waiting. The other restaurant has a line of people waiting outside to get in. There's energy, there's noise, there's a crowd. Without knowing anything at all about the food, without reading reviews, without checking the menu, you're far more likely to assume the busy restaurant is better. The crowd acts as a powerful signal of quality. Even if the food in the empty restaurant is just as good, or maybe even better, the lack of customers makes it seem less appealing, less trustworthy. This decision happens almost instantly, without deep thought. It feels safe, feels smart, to follow what many others have already chosen. That's social proof at work. Social proof plays an absolutely massive role in marketing and sales. Companies use testimonials, reviews, ratings, visible numbers, all strategically designed to influence behavior. Seeing a product labeled as a bestseller makes people far more likely to buy it. Not because they've carefully compared all the options, not because they've done research, but because they assume that many purchases must mean the product is good. It must be reliable, it must work. Online stores display star ratings and customer counts for exactly this reason. A product with thousands of positive reviews creates an immediate sense of safety, of trust. People think if so many other people liked it, if so many people bought it and were satisfied, then it's probably the right choice for me too. This mental shortcut saves time and energy. You don't have to research every detail, you just follow the crowd. But it can also lead to mistakes, especially if the crowd is wrong, or if the reviews have been manipulated, purchased, or faked. Social media has amplified this effect to an almost unimaginable degree. When a post has thousands of likes, when it has been shared tens of thousands of times, viewers automatically assume it's important, that it's true, that it matters. This can spread both useful, accurate information and complete misinformation at the exact same speed. A video or a rumor that gains momentum, that starts going viral, can appear far more credible simply because of its popularity. People may not stop to question the content. They may not fact-check. They may not think critically. Instead, they take the reaction of thousands of other people as evidence of truth. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where attention feeds more attention, where popularity breeds more popularity, regardless of whether the information is actually accurate, helpful, or true. Consider a viral challenge that spreads across the internet. One person posts a video doing something unusual, maybe silly, maybe dangerous. Maybe pouring a bucket of ice water over their head, maybe doing a specific dance, maybe eating something strange. Others see it and copy it, and soon millions of people are participating. Some join for fun, some join for a cause like charity, and many, maybe most, join simply because they see everyone else doing it. The behavior spreads incredibly quickly, not because each person has deeply considered whether it's a good idea, whether it's safe, whether it aligns with their values. It spreads because the crowd provides such a powerful signal that this is the thing to do right now, that this is what everyone is doing, that you'll be left out if you don't participate. Social proof also influences decisions in emergencies, and that can be really dangerous. Imagine you're in a crowded building, maybe a theater or an office, when a fire alarm suddenly sounds. You're unsure. Is this real? Is this just a drill? Should I evacuate? You look around. If the people around you stay calm, if they remain seated, if they keep doing what they were doing, you're far more likely to do the same. You think, well, they're not worried, so maybe it's fine. If they rush toward the exit, if they start moving quickly, you're far more likely to follow them without even questioning whether it's necessary. In these moments, watching others provides quick guidance when there's no time to carefully analyze the situation. But this can be incredibly dangerous if the crowd is wrong. A calm group might stay put during a real serious fire, assuming it's nothing. Or a panicked group might cause harm by stamping, by crushing people, by creating chaos when a calm, orderly exit would have been safer. Businesses exploit social proof intentionally and strategically. Limited time offers with labels like only 3 left in stock or only 2 rooms available at this price create urgency by showing that others are buying, that the product is in demand. Even if the limit is completely artificial, even if the company has plenty of inventory, the message triggers a fear of missing out. You think, other people want this. I need to act fast or I'll lose my chance. Similarly, restaurants list certain dishes as most popular or chef's favorite to steer your choices. The popularity claim, whether it's true or not, makes diners feel safe picking that option. You think, well, if it's the most popular, it must be good. Even if it's not truly the best dish, even if there are better options on the menu, the label influences your decision. This illusion also appears constantly in workplace settings. During meetings, employees may stay completely quiet, even when they have doubts, even when they disagree if they see that most people seem to agree with a proposal. They assume the group must be correct. They think everyone else seems on board. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe my concerns aren't valid. This is a form of groupthink, where the desire to fit in, to not rock the boat, to not stand out, overpowers independent judgment. A single voice of dissent, one person willing to say, wait, I have a concern or I see a problem here, can sometimes break this pattern. But speaking up requires real courage because it means going against the social signal, against the apparent consensus. Fashion trends show just how incredibly powerful social proof can be. When a celebrity, an influencer, someone with visibility and status, wears a certain style, fans immediately copy it. As more and more people adopt the look, it becomes a trend. The popularity itself becomes a huge part of the appeal. People buy the item not only because they genuinely like it, but because they want to align with the group, because they want to be part of what's happening, what's current, what's cool. When the trend fades, when the next thing comes along, interest disappears just as quickly. The product's actual value, its quality, its usefulness, none of that changed. Only the social signal surrounding it changed, and that was enough to completely shift behavior. Politics and public opinion are shaped by these exact same forces. When a candidate draws large crowds, when they dominate news coverage, when they seem to have momentum, people perceive them as strong, as popular, as the likely winner. Voters may support the candidate simply because they seem like the winning choice, because everyone else seems to be supporting them. Poll numbers, whether they're accurate or not, can influence momentum in powerful ways. If people believe everyone else is backing a particular candidate, they may join in to avoid feeling left out, to be on the winning side, to align with what seems inevitable. The social proof illusion can lead to really poor decisions when the crowd is uninformed, when the crowd is misled, when the crowd is acting on emotion rather than facts. During the early days of a new technology, for example, hype can create a rush of investment. If everyone seems to be buying, if everyone is talking about it, individuals feel enormous pressure to join in, even without understanding the product, even without knowing if it has real value. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. The dot-com boom, sudden rises in cryptocurrency prices, speculative bubbles in real estate. When the bubble eventually bursts, when reality doesn't match the hype, many people lose significant money, sometimes everything they invested, because their choices were based on following others rather than on careful evaluation of the actual fundamentals. A clear, simple example of this happens in restaurants with tip jars. If a tip jar already contains some visible money, even just a few bills, it encourages more tips. The sight of others contributing acts as proof that tipping is expected, that it's normal, that it's what you should do. If the jar were completely empty, some people might hesitate. They might wonder, do people tip here? Is it expected? But seeing money already in the jar answers that question instantly. The same principle applies to online fundraising platforms. A campaign with many donations, with visible progress toward a goal, appears trustworthy, appears legitimate, and that encourages even more donations. People think all these people donated. It must be a good cause, it must be real. Tourist attractions rely heavily on social proof. Long lines outside a museum, a theme park ride, a famous landmark, all suggest that it's worth waiting for, that there's something special inside. Even if the line exists simply because of poor crowd management, or because of a temporary delay, or because everyone arrived at the same time, passers-by see it as a sign of value. They think, look at that line. It must be amazing. They may join the line without even knowing why it's long in the first place. This creates a feedback loop where the line itself generates more interest, where the crowd attracts more people simply because it's a crowd. In classrooms, students constantly look to their peers when they're unsure how to respond. If most students raise their hands to answer a question, others are more likely to follow. If no one responds, if the room stays silent, individuals hesitate. They don't want to be the first. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to risk being wrong. Teachers who understand this dynamic can encourage participation by planting early positive responses, by calling on students they know will answer, which then spreads confidence and participation through the rest of the group. The desire to follow others comes from a deep need for belonging, for safety, for connection. Being part of the group feels reassuring. It feels right. Standing apart can feel risky, especially in public situations where you're visible, where you might be judged. This is exactly why social proof is so incredibly effective in advertising and persuasion. Marketers know, they deeply understand, that people are far more likely to act when they see others doing the same thing. Phrases like "join millions of satisfied customers," or "people just like you are using this service," or "trusted by over 100,000 users," all of these are carefully designed to trigger the instinct to follow the crowd. Even reviews can be manipulated in really deceptive ways. Product might have thousands of positive ratings that were purchased, that were generated by bots, that came from people who were paid to leave positive feedback. Shoppers see those numbers. They assume the ratings reflect genuine approval, genuine satisfaction. So they buy without further research, without reading carefully, without questioning. Later, they may discover the product is low quality, that it doesn't work as advertised. But by then, the company has already profited from the illusion of popularity. In daily life, the social proof illusion can be incredibly subtle, almost invisible. If you walk into a meeting and everyone is checking their phones, you're very likely to pull out your phone too, even if you weren't planning to, even if you don't need to. The behavior spreads without any discussion, without any announcement. Similarly, if you see a group of people laughing, you may smile. You may even start laughing yourself, even before you know what the joke is. The actions of others create a context, an atmosphere that shapes your own actions automatically, unconsciously. Understanding the social proof illusion helps explain why trends rise and fall so quickly, why things go viral and then disappear. Once the social signal fades, once fewer people are doing it, once it's no longer what everyone is talking about, the behavior stops. People move on to the next popular thing, the next trend, because the underlying force was never really about personal preference alone. It was about the safety and comfort of following the group, of being part of something, of not being left out. By recognizing when you're acting based on what others are doing rather than on your own judgment, on your own values, on your own needs, you can make decisions that truly fit you, decisions that are genuinely right for your situation, instead of just copying the crowd because that's what feels safe in the moment. Finally, let's talk about authority bias. This happens when people are more likely to believe or obey someone who appears to be in a position of power, someone who seems to have authority, expertise, or status. This effect can lead to decisions and actions that individuals might never take on their own, that they might even disagree with, but they follow through anyway because the instruction or suggestion came from someone they perceive as an authority figure. The presence of authority changes how people think and behave, often without them even realizing the shift is happening. So there you have it. We've journeyed through the fascinating world of psychological biases together, exploring how framing shapes our decisions, how negativity pulls at our attention, how halos color our judgments, how sunk costs trap us, how crowds influence us, and how authority guides us. These biases are part of being human. They're wired into how we think, how we feel, how we navigate this complex world. But now that you understand them, you have something powerful. You have awareness. And awareness is always the first step toward making better choices, toward seeing things more clearly, toward living more intentionally. If you found this exploration helpful, if something resonated with you, if you learned something new tonight, I have a small favor to ask. We're on a journey to reach 700 subscribers, and we're not quite there yet. Your support would mean absolutely everything. Hit that subscribe button right now. It takes just 1 second, but it helps us reach more curious minds like yours, more people who want to understand how their minds work, more listeners who are ready to think a little deeper about the world around them. And here's the thing, I really want to hear from you. Down in the comments section, tell me which bias surprised you the most. Was it the framing effect, negativity bias, the halo effect? Maybe you recognized one of these biases in your own life. Share your story, ask a question, tell me what topic you'd like us to explore next. Your comments don't just help the algorithm, they help me understand what matters to you, what you're curious about, what keeps you up at night thinking. This channel grows because of conversations, because of community, because of you. So take a moment right now, subscribe if you haven't already, drop a comment below, share this episode with someone who loves psychology, someone who asks deep questions, someone who would enjoy this kind of thoughtful exploration. Together we can build something special here, a space for curiosity, for learning, for understanding ourselves and each other just a little bit better. Thank you so much for spending this time with me tonight. Your attention, your curiosity, your willingness to listen all the way to the end, it means more than you know. Until next time, sleep well, think deeply, and I'll see you in the next episode.